Sadistic Penguin Studios presents the At the Show podcast with Tom Yumper Garcia.
Okay, you people sit tight, hold the fort, and keep the home fires burning. And if we're not back by dawn, call the president.
And Tony Tulsa Burke.
I don't know this industry jargon, YP, MP, whatever, okay? All I know is that I cannot get a record contract. We cannot get a record contract unless I take these tapes.
It's almost time, so grab a drink, get your popcorn ready, and join the film discussion with two guys from Chicago talking movies.
I had to make sure I put that one up there for us, Tone. Hello, and welcome to episode, I believe, 40 of season 4 of the At the Show podcast, presented to you by the Sadistic Penguin Studios. And my co-host has ran away, and I am alone. No, I'm one of your co-hosts, Tom Yumper Garcia, and my other co-host, Tony the Sugar Baggy Bird, should be back. He's just having some technical difficulties. Today, we have a very big show planned for you. It's the last show of the 2024 year. We're going to be talking some Gremlins, probably a Christmas movie that isn't really considered a Christmas movie. It's more of a horror Christmas movie.
Great timing, Wayne.
Yeah, it's all good, man. I covered for you. The Sugar Baggy has returned. He's back.
I am here. Some days you feel like Godzilla, and some days you feel like Tokyo. Here's my Godzilla I got for Christmas back in 1988. And King Kong too. Whoa. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, I was telling everybody we have a big packed show. We're doing Gremlins, a film that isn't really considered a Christmas film.
Not really.
It's more of a horror film, but it is a Christmas film. It's based in Christmas time.
We love horror movies here and kind of like Christmas, I guess, a little bit, right? So let's mix them up.
Christmas time, you know?
It is Christmas time.
It's holidays. Holiday season is here.
Next year we will bring Krampus to you live, a live rendition, me and you.
Yeah, a live, right? One of us is going to dress up as Krampus.
Yes. If I thought about it, I would have did that.
Oh my goodness. Should have dressed up as Santa this year.
Yes.
But Tone, let's get in, since you're back, let's get into our first segment, and that is of what we have been watching, my friend.
Let's do it.
That's a me. And also, what were you just watching?
So what you been watching, my guy?
I started off watching a brand new series that has been running on HBO Max for a couple weeks now. It is by DC, called Creature Commandos. It is really the voice actors for this is really kind of loaded. It's got everyone from Frank Grillo and David Harbour to Sean Gunn and Alan Tudyk. It is the second thing I've watched since this new incarnation of DC, the first being the Penguin, which I really, really enjoyed. I don't usually watch these type of shows that, you know, we've talked before. I don't usually gravitate, but I was just like, you know what, let's check it out. And honestly, I am very impressed with the overall visuals.
Who's Jason and the Argonauts?
It's Dr. Phosphorus.
Why are you doing this?
It's business.
What is that thing?
It's got a really cool, kind of reminds me a little bit of Heavy Metal in some ways. The old comic book series from the 70s and 80s. It isn't like it's PG. It's more like PG-13, kind of more R. There is some vulgar language in it, but overall it's very, very interesting so far, to the point where it brings me back to keep wanting to watch it. It kind of takes place after the events of the Suicide Squad from 2021, which wasn't a terrible movie, and after the first season of The Peacemaker. What's cool about this is it's a team of monsters, Black Op monsters, led by Rick Flag Sr., And if you're familiar with the story, Rick Flag Jr. was in the Suicide Squad. So very, very interesting little show altogether. And I just wanted to note I replaced Creature Commandos with the Joker 2, which, my God, I couldn't talk about that movie tonight, but just yeah. Well,
Watched it, huh?
Well, I guess you could say I watched it. I angrily sat through it. It wasn't really anything. It was more of like a showpiece, I guess. It reminded me of like an art. It tried to be like something very artsy and fartsy, but it didn't work for the Joker. So stick with Creature Commandos. That was really, really, really cool. Have you checked it out yet? Yep.
Creature Commandos? No, I have not. And no, I have not checked out the Joker.
Yeah, please pick up Creature Commandos. No Joker. I also talk about a complete juxtaposition. Checked out this movie Conclave because I've heard rave reviews, and the cast was loaded. And hilariously, last week you talked in high favor of Mr. John Lithgow, and Mr. John Lithgow puts together a pretty amazing performance in this movie, along with Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci. The cast is pretty deep. What it is it's about a pope who has died suddenly, and he needs to be replaced. And Ralph Fiennes is kind of like the guy who needs to vet everybody who is going to be the next pope. Now, I don't know if you've ever checked it out, but on HBO, a really, really cool show. It was called The Young Pope, and it was with Jude Law. And you're thinking religious, and you're thinking not too salacious, but both this and that is everything as crazy as any other kind of movie you would watch that would deal with anything that had to do with pretty much high stakes situation. So a pretty interesting movie if you get a chance to check this one out.
Yeah, definitely good. I heard about it.
I have a feeling we're going to be talking about it in a couple months when we probably do one of our Oscar shows, because I have a feeling from what I'm seeing and hearing, it's getting nominated in every other award ceremony. So someone's going to get nominated in this. More than likely, Ralph, Stanley Tucci. But I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see it in that space. It's on Peacock now, so it was they just put it up last Friday, which was nice. I still got to make it to see James McAvoy's new movie they just put up there. It's like a horror movie. Don't Speak. He's in the cabin in the woods or something. I'll talk about that next time. But check this one out. What have you been watching? Yep.
So I went to an old classic Christmas movie that was talked about a lot on Twitter today, or X, is the Christmas Vacation, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. A couple of our friends actually saw it for the first time, and they didn't like it. Joey P says Joker 2 was nonsense, and Tony, I guess, can agree with that.
Yes.
Christmas Vacation, it still holds up to a certain degree today. I mean, I don't know if all the stuff can be made today. The more and more I watch the film, I just still can't get out of my head how much of an asshole Chevy Chase is in real life. But the Griswolds are pretty funny, and it's pretty hilarious that in that movie they're afraid of a squirrel that happens to come out of a tree. And the more and more I watched it, I kept thinking that Uncle Felix is the guy who gets killed by a fucking cat in the Tales of the Dark Side movie. Cat goes down his throat. But yeah, Christmas classic. I'm pretty sure it's
also great in the Tales from the Crypt episode with Arnold Schwarzenegger when they switch bodies. Him and William Hickey. I mean, Rick Rossovich from Terminator and William Hickey. But go on. I'm sorry.
No. He is in there. But yeah, Christmas Vacation is a tradition to watch. Actually, my mom had turned it on, and I was watching it because I came home from work. And it was just on, so I finished it out. And then I had to get some John Carpenter get my John Carpenter fix. I actually watched both Escape from New York and Escape from LA, two drastically different films. One with a bigger budget and Escape from LA, but I'm just going to talk about Escape from New York because that's actually the good one. This one is one of those films that doesn't get talked about enough in terms of like the way it transcended film. It's dark. It's basically you're in a apocalyptic kind of like community. Kurt Russell's character, this thing that cracks me up about this one and the other one is they keep referring to him like it's like a Roadhouse before it was Roadhouse. I thought you were dead in a Roadhouse. I thought you were bigger. And then
Oh
they
yeah.
use that line in the new one, like the Skip from LA. I thought you were bigger, which I was like, come on, don't rip off Roadhouse. But you got Lee Van Cleef in this film. If anybody knows the good, the bad, the ugly, he's the bad in that film. You got Isaac Hayes as a Duke. You got Donald
Don't
Pleasence.
come down here, Duke.
Yeah.
Come
You got Donald Pleasence, who everybody knows as Dr. Loomis from Halloween. You got Henry Dean Stanton, who plays the Brain, and if you don't know who he is, he's actually the father in Pretty in Pink. It's a lot of people in this film that I totally forgot in there. You got Tom Atkins, who's the horniest man in Halloween 3, and he's also in Maniac Cop. You have what's her name? Help me out. Adrienne Barbeau.
Barbeau.
Yeah, who's from The Fog. She was actually married to John Carpenter at this time. She was also in Creepshow for The Crate. She just called her Billy. Classic film. I loved everything about it. It still holds up today. You got Ox. I forget his name. I forget Ox's last name, but he's a pro wrestler, Ox Baker, who plays one of the bad guys in the film. And I love that when he gets the fucking bat in the back of his head. It's just like it's really dark. It keeps you on edge. You don't know what's happening. And I thought it was really done well for the time. And Snake is Bliskin is a badass. What do you think about Skip from New York, my man?
Well, I mean, real quick to rewind back to Christmas Vacation. Great song, great Christmas Vacation. The song for Christmas Vacation, Christmas. But back to music, also Escape from New York. Really awesome early Carpenter synth work working in this one, and it's a classic, man. I mean, I wouldn't doubt if somewhere down the road we were to break this one down for a full episode because it deserves it. Quick note, if I could take you anywhere right now in time in my time machine that I don't own, but if I wish I did, I wish I could take you to the viewing that I went with to my father to see Escape from LA. And we got in the car, and nothing was funnier than going to see a movie with him, and he didn't like it on the way home because he just cussed and was pissed. And boy, was he, and he loved Escape from New York. He was pissed off at Escape from LA, like, and for reasons where he was like, in the original, they go in the wrestling ring. In this one, they play basketball. What a downgrade, like stuff like that. And I would just be like, I guess you're right now that I look at it, but Escape from New York is just so much superior to LA, although the soundtrack to Escape from LA is pretty awesome, and I'm sure I'll talk about it at some point. But
yeah,
two great picks.
The bad thing is like Escape from LA has great actors. T.P. Shemmy's in there. You have Kurt Russell, of course, is in there. What's his name? The dude from Spider-Man. Uncle he plays the old man.
Yes.
But he's in there. It's
Cliff Robertson. Yep.
Thank you.
Well, I always remember him because we always had to watch this movie in school called Charlie.
Oh,
and he was in that, and but yes.
Yes, you got like Pam Grier's in there. It's got good actors. It's just horribly written, and it's even Bruce Campbell's in there, and I love Bruce Campbell.
Well, yeah, it's just there's some things that are just I'm shocked that he went that route, but we still love Carpenter.
I think maybe he just did it for the money for this one, but check out the original. It's actually really good. And Jack says, I got it on right now, Joey. He scroll scene is hilarious. Yeah, it's Jack. That scroll scene is like obnoxious because it's a damn squirrel and they're acting like it's like a raccoon or something. My favorite part's when Uncle Felix sets himself on fire and he doesn't notice it. He's like, what? And he goes and tackles him. He's like, you look what you did to my tree. And then the father-in-law in that film is such an asshole. It wasn't a good tree anyway.
I mean, as a child watching that movie, I mean, my favorite scene was when he got the bonus and he read it in front of everybody. It was like almost like, man, I wish that I didn't wish that would happen to me because you don't want that kind of bonus, but to be able to go off like that in front of everyone and everyone just stares at you. It's kind of like Steve Martin when he goes off on what's his name in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Yeah.
It's like a nonstop
rant,
which he doesn't miss. So yeah, classic. A lot of great one-liners, as Joey said.
Yeah, classic film. So that's what we've watched this week. Let us know what you've watched over at the Show podcast on Twitter, X, or whatever Elon decides to do before he runs the country into the ground. Or let us know at our own at Lil Yumper or at the Sugar Baggy. Let us know what's going on there for the films that you've watched this week. Tone, before we get into our main event of our show breakdown, because this is going to be a long one, or I don't know, maybe. Just want to give a heads up. Our buddy Gordo is still going to have surgery. He got it postponed. If you want to know, check out Yo Soy Muy Gordo on Twitter. You can read his story of why he did not get his surgery this week, but he is going to get it next month. Gordo is still, going to need help with those medical bills, and hopefully with the setback, it's not as much. But if you want to get a shirt, you have some extra dough on you. $30, all the money goes to Gordo. We don't take any of it. You get a shirt, all the proceeds from the shirt go to him. And we've been giving him money every time we see him, as well as sending to his Vimo when we sell them. So if you want, I'm going to drop the link in the chat, and we'll have the link also with our video like we always do. Or you can head over to statisticpenguins.com, statisticpenguinstudios.com, and click the merch button, and then his shirt will be right there. Help out our guy Gordo with his medical bills if you can, if you have some change left over from Christmas. But with that, Tone, let's get into this main event of Gremlins, my man. When was the first time you saw this film, dude?
Oh, 7, 8, 9. It was early. It was a lot, to the point that, this wasn't one I had to do much research on, because it's like riding a bike. It's the definition of classic for me. It was played a lot by everybody that I knew when I was a kid. So honestly, it's the effects hold up. They hold up really well.
Yeah, they do. And I remember that mostly about the film, about the effects. I also love, just the look of it, the going through a small town atmosphere. This is like prime Spielberg era. Spielberg presented this, even though he didn't direct it. It's a prime Spielberg era. I really, really enjoyed this one. But when we get to the breakdown, we'll find out who wrote it, the actors that were cast, and stuff like that. But I remember watching this maybe when I was about 7 or 8. It came out before I was born, but I remember seeing it, and then I remember going to see the sequel with my parents. It came out in 90. I didn't see it when it was in theater, but I did see it at the drive-in.
That's
so
awesome.
I always remember the part in the sequel where Phoebe Cates is talking about like something, she does this, and I'm always like, why is she doing that? And she has that ridiculous hat on. But yeah,
for the sequel, I always remember a certain wrestler's appearance in his wear. Yeah, and that's for some unknown reason as a kid, that's what stuck in my head. He's in the movie. He's in this movie. It was stupid now that I look back at it.
Yeah,
we'll get to that later.
But the original holds up today, and it is a Christmas film, so we're gonna break this one down. So let's get into the development of this film.
In my thoughts, I use the technique of positive visualization.
Christopher.
Yeah, Christopher. So where did the story of this come from? Well, the story of Gremlins actually is from the mastermind of Christopher Columbus. No, not that Columbus that fucking traveled across on 3 ships. We're talking about Christopher Columbus, the man who directed Home Alone and Home Alone 2. He also is known for a lot of kids' movies. He directed, I believe, Mrs. Doubtfire as well.
Wasn't he supposed to direct Christmas Vacation, and then he got in a fight with Chase?
Yeah.
So he had to leave.
Yeah, he left. Yeah.
Yeah.
Left that one. Yeah. He also did, I believe, a Harry Potter film as well. Chris Columbus, at the time, was a relatively unknown screenwriter and conceived the idea of Gremlins in the early 1980s. He was inspired because he lived in a New York loft and he heard a bunch of mice scurrying at night, imagining these nocturnal creatures transforming into something more crazy. He began developing a story from this and thought, well, let's make them into small little creatures, not just mice, some little monsters. It's kind of funny. He lived in New York, and rats and mice inspired him for this screenplay. He originally wrote Gremlins as a spec script, something he created with no guarantee of a sale. The original script was much more darker and much more horror oriented than the final film, featuring the Gremlins doing more violent things, such as decapitating the family dog and attacking Santa Claus. Well, they do attack Santa Claus in the film, but not the way I'm pretty sure Chris Columbus wanted them to, which I think is hilarious. While Columbus had originally intended it as a personal calling card to showcase his writing ability, he had no immediate plans for it to become a major Hollywood production. But somehow this script found its way into some guys by the name of Steven Spielberg's hands. And after it circulated around, industry context, Spielberg finally got his hands on it. This is prime Spielberg, as we said. This is at the height of a post ET influence, and he saw its potential. If you guys don't know, Spielberg is a weirdo, and he likes a lot of weird scripts. He was drawn to it in its unique blend of horror and dark comedy, as well as the suburban whimsery, which a lot of time, if you know, in the 80s, it's a lot of suburbs movies. Pretty in Pink's one of them. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is another. Breakfast Club. All those films are all set in the suburbs, and he recognized the script's capacity to be lighted for a more broader appeal of audiences. He was looking for a fresh, offbeat project to produce under his newly found Ambient Entertainment banner, which is a company he had. And he personally championed the project. So you have one of the biggest directors at the time, and probably still at the time, championing your work. You know it's going to get funded. He believed that the story's Gremlins creature in a small town setting offered a modern twist on the classic creature feature. So Columbus got lucky getting Spielberg to back him.
Well, I mean, it's pretty when you think about it. The idea at that time, not much like it, really. So I could see Spielberg being, I mean, like E.T. isn't really like Gremlins. So like, I'm shocked that honestly, later we could talk about it more, but that they haven't done more with the whole Gremlins thing that they have already done.
Yeah,
it seems like such a big product that they could have done so much more with.
I totally agree. Could have been a lot more than what they have done with it. The crazy thing is, this before Spielberg was attached completely, he Columbus, that is, had pitched this to Universal and Paramount, and Universal, when didn't pass on it. They said it was just too dark of a script and that it wasn't easily marketed. And then even when Spielberg came on, they're like, "Yeah, we still can't do it." Paramount hesitated because it said the script had odd mix of elements as risky. They expressed concern that the story lacked a clear demographic. It was neither a full-fledged horror film nor a straightforward family comedy, so they couldn't do it. But luckily for them, when Spielberg said, "Okay, I'm just going to produce this no matter what," several studios after that were interested, and one of them being Warner Brothers, who ultimately agreed to produce the film. They saw it as an opportunity to align with Spielberg's brand, which, I mean, he's the hottest director. Why not align with him? And tap into the growing trend of family-oriented fantasy films with a subversive edge, such as E.T. or in later Ghostbusters is considered one as well. Uh, so we got our studio now that's on board. We have the script. We have Steven Spielberg on there. Next thing we do is secure a director. Believe it or not, Steven Spielberg did not want to direct this. He wanted to produce. And he wanted a director who could handle the story's tricky balance of humor and horror. Initially, he considered more established directors, but most of them turned him down because they thought it was odd or hard to categorize. One of them being Toby Hooper, who some say might have directed Poltergeist. I say Steven Spielberg directed it. He also directed the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Hooper, that is. He was considered, but he passed on it because he felt it was a blend of whimsy and mayhem, and he wasn't in line with the straight horror aesthetic he preferred. Hooper's a big horror guy, so he didn't know if he could blend the comedy in there, so he didn't know how to actually treat the film.
What about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2?
Yeah, that's kind of crazy that you bring that up because maybe that this inspired him to go into the comedy route.
Could have been. Could have been.
There was another guy by the name of Tim Burton at this stage who was considered, but he was only known for short films But he did have a unique style, and Spielberg was impressed by his sensibilities, but Warner Brothers was wary of entrusting a large project to him. Ultimately, Burton was never formally offered a project, primarily due to his lack of feature film experience at the time. Burton, of course, went on to do Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which is one of my favorite films, and a big hit, cult classic. Uh, they eventually settled on Joe Dante. He was brought in to the attention of Spielberg because of his work on Piranha and The Howling. Dante had a proven edit of mixing horror and humor, and Spielberg admired Dante's genre-savvy filmmaking. Dante's background in low-budget creature features and his understanding of special effects and animatronics, like he did in The Howling, made him a strong candidate. Dante eagerly accepted the offer. He was thrilled at the chance to work with Spielberg, as who wouldn't be, and to have a larger budget and more resources to bring to the Gremlins. And that's our director now. We have somebody, and it's kind of crazy they had considered Tim Burton. Do you think this film is different with Tim Burton?
Yeah. I mean, especially considering, some of Tim Burton's first work is unique in his own way. I would have felt he would have made this even more unique in his own way that some of his early work.
Yeah, I think it would have been more darker, but I could see him blending in the comedy. I mean, Pee-wee's Big Adventure has a bunch of comedy in it.
No, you're right.
So, in casting the film, Spielberg and director Joe Dante sought a cast that would ground the film's unusual premise: tiny monsters in a small American town, and a believable, relatable human characters to interact with them. They aim to avoid star-driven casting for leads, so they try to keep out stars for leads, preferring fresh faces, even though John Lithgow was actually considered for a role but had to pass. And they would actually thought that maybe stars would overshadow the fantasy elements of the story. The casting process balanced the desire for youthful, relatable protagonists, a warm and endearing love interest, and a variety of distinctive supporting players that could populate this Norman Rockwell-esque town with realism and humor. For the role of Billy Peltzer, which eventually went to Zach Galligan, the production team considered numerous young male actors who were making names for themselves in the early 80s. Among them were Emilio Estevez, who would become a member of the Brat Pack. But they felt his image wasn't quite right. Judd Nelson, who was a member of the Brat Pack, whose edgier persona did not align with the earnest innocence they needed. Johnny Depp was considered, but he was unknown and was considered early on, but he was intriguing, but they figured that he had a lack of a record, which I always hate that. It's like when you go for a job and they're like, oh, it's an entry-level job, and they say you need experience. Well, how am I going to get experience if it's an entry-level job? And then you get to my boy Johnny Depp. Other young talents who have begun circulating around the Hollywood casting offices, such as Eric Stoltz, who eventually would go on to be in Back to the Future and then get fired. Anthony Edwards and your boy Crispin Glover were part of general casting discussions. Can you imagine Crispin Glover as Billy Peltzer? Do you think he could dance?
I just immediately think of him grabbing his headphones and Back to the Future. Was too loud in his head. No, he would be good though in his own way, but again, I think it was meant for Mr. Galligan, Mr. House of what's it, Waxwork?
Yes, House of Wax.
Yeah, House
Waxwork
of
Wax. Waxwork 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Eventually, they did go with Galligan, who was relatively unknown and came into the project with minimum film credits, which is why it's kind of weird they didn't choose Depp. But he auditioned like many others, but the turning point came when he read opposite of Phoebe Katz. Steven Spielberg, who was present at some of the auditions, noticed natural chemistry between the two. The rapport felt genuine and warm, and exactly the dynamic needed to anchor the more outlandish elements of the story. Galligan's slightly awkward, sincere demeanor was ideal for the character of Billy. He came across as an everyday suburban kid, someone who could be overwhelmed and resourceful when faced with extraordinary circumstances. And then I think like 10, 20 years later, he got caught stealing from a coconuts or something. Didn't he? I think he was stealing like some CDs or something.
Yeah.
For the character of Kate Berenger, who was cast by Phoebe Katz, The actresses considered prior to her were Jennifer Jason Leigh, which started with Cats in Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
And are
She was
still,
known,
which is crazy, they are still best friends to this day.
yeah, she's known for her dramatic intensity, but was considered too serious for the gentle, supportive nature required for Kate, which I don't understand because her as the character in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, she was gentle and sincere. So Leah Thompson was an up and coming actress who read for several teen oriented roles around the time. While Thompson had a friendly presence, her eventual success in Back to the Future highlights how perfectly matched she was to the project rather than Gremlins. At the time, her casting as Kate never solidified. Lori Loughlin just started out to appear in TV in small roles, was briefly entertained as an option. However, Kate's had a slightly more established name after the Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which gave her a recognizable screen presence. I'm guessing they saw the scene where she comes out of the pool. And if you ever rented that movie from the video store, you always knew that the tracking on that VHS is always messed up by that area because people will constantly rewind that part of the film. That's a true story. Like I rented that Fast Time at Ridgemont High from my video store, and that is true. Like when that scene came on, it like started like tracking issues.
Oh, that's great.
But yeah, she was coming off Fast Times. Kate had proven could handle both comedic and dramatic beats. She balanced innocence with a subtle sophistication and chemistry reach. Again, her and Billy's character of Zach Gilligan hit it off, so everybody thought the chemistry was there. And Dante and Spielberg felt that the on-screen ease complemented Zaligan's energy and would help maintain audience investment in the human core of the film. So that's why she was cast for the role of Rand Petzler, who is Terese's favorite character. If you read his blog about how he's an asshole, Hoyt Axton was cast. Characters like John Lithgow was considered for this. Our man Jerry Orbach was considered for this. The Lieutenant Lenny Briscoe was initially on the concept list, but Lithgow's schedule, combined with his growing reputation for heavier dramatic roles and Orbach's previous commitments, prevented them from either be locked in. I kind of like that Jerry didn't get this or John Lithgow. I do think John Lithgow would have been fine, but I kind of like Hoyt Axton. He brings like a jolliness to this film.
He does.
The filmmakers wanted someone to be inventive, warm, and just slightly offbeat, an everyday tinkerer whose gadgets never quite worked. And Axton was cast because he was primarily known as a folk hero at the time, and he was naturally likable and familiarly warm. Dante appreciated that Axton's casting would lend authenticity and a down-home charm. He was not a Hollywood leading man type, which helped sell the Peltzer family as a genuine small-town folk. Remember, they were looking for people who were kind of famous, but not those leading star names, and this helped. And also, he was really easygoing. He played wonderfully against the film's more bizarre moments, and his folksy voice lent gravitas to the film's narrative voiceover in certain points. I do like his voiceover.
Mm-hmm.
This is a role that I thought was kind of weird because it's Gerald Hopkins and it's given to Judge Reinhold, who was Brad in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Again, he had worked with Kate in Fast Times at Ridgemont High and brought a certain recognizable face to a smaller role. And his role is extremely small. I think he maybe gets like maybe 5 to 7 minutes of film time. It's very, very in the beginning. Producers knew Reinhold could handle comedic scenes and appear self-important, making Gerald the perfect, making Reinhold the perfect foil to Billy's earnestness. His casting added a dimension of workplace rivalry and a modern yuppie attitude to his small town bank setting. He basically plays the character from The Mask that owns the bank. That's basically what he plays in here.
That's true.
It's very, very, it's kind of like a dick, but he's not really in it enough to like really hate him. You can tell he's a dick. That's about it. And then you have Mrs. Daigle, who's played by Polly Holiday. She's very, very bitchy in this film. For a town's resident Scrooge, the filmmakers wanted someone larger than life who could elicit both laughs and boos. While no famous screen villains of all time, e.g. Louise Fletcher, formerly tested for the role, there were discussions about casting a well-known starring actress. However, they opted for someone who could push the comedic angle. Polly Holliday, famous for her role as Flo on TV sitcoms Alice, was a recognizable face who could effectively portray an exaggerated, cankerous figure. Her ability to deliver humor with a bite made Mrs. Daigle a memorable and amusing antagonist, especially when faced with the anarchy unleashed by the Gremlins. What do you think of Mrs. Daigle in this film?
Nailed the part. You know what I mean? Really, it's really just it's funny how thinking of like the Louise Fletchers of the time trying out for the role. I love hearing when you read it, because I mean, even going back to Judge Reinhold, you ever see the Clerks cartoon
Yes.
where he plays the judge?
Yeah, Judge Reinhold.
Judge Reinhold. I
Yeah.
see that's just but again, the castings are perfect. And for a minute there, when you brought up Judge Reinhold, for a second I tried to imagine him in the Zach Galligan role. I don't know. But he does Gerald Hopkins pretty well.
Yeah. It'd be kind of funny because he was fantasizing about her in the infamous bathroom scene, and then he gets with her in this film. But for the other
maybe, possibly
maybe for the other ensemble cast members, you had Murray Futterman, who was played by Dick Miller, and he was a director favorite. Joe Dante frequently employed actors he admired from the Roger Corman days. Dick Miller, having worked with Dante on Piranha and The Howling, was almost a given. His familiar working class persona grounded the film further. I love Dick Murray. He's actually in Small Soldiers in the late 90s. I always remember him from that film. And I remember from Gremlins 2 when he's like, "It's one of them." It always cracks me up, his role. And he's also in a Tales from the Crypt film, Demon Knight.
Yes, he sure is. He sure is in that movie. He's got one of those faces that have always been like, you know, when you see him pop up in anything, you're like, wow. You know, he's in The Burbs. He's awesome in The Burbs. You know, I mean, anything he's in, he's great, which is another Joe Dante film.
Yep. They wanted a young talent for youth appeal, so they went with Billy's young friend by the name of Pete, and they wanted a child actor capable of both wide-eyed wonder and mischievous energy. In the early 1980s, Hollywood had a crop of them. Henry Thomas from E.T. was known for quality, but was already ironic for the scene. Ironic, I mean by iconic for the scene, not ironic. I'm just an idiot. Nolan Hathaway from The Never Ending Story, which Jackie's favorite part is when the horse dies, was also considered for the project, but had stuff going on elsewhere. So they went to the kings of the 80s. They went to one of the Coreys. Corey Feldman, already demonstrating a knack of comedic timing and youthful spirit, caught Dante's attention. His casting added a recognizable kid energy to the mix, ensuring the younger audiences had someone to identify with. And even if Pete's role was secondary. See, I don't agree with that too much, Tone, because Corey Feldman is very, very, again, scarcely seen in this film. He's seen during the water scene, and then he's seen shooting out with his slingshot, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, very small role. You know, he doesn't shave his head like he does at the end of Friday the 13th.
Oh, God. So that's pretty much our cast, but there were actors who turned down the roles, and a lot of the reasons that were given, while they weren't big name actors, a lot of them didn't really know how to act out the script. They didn't know what the tone of the script was going to be. Again, this is something that was kind of new in this era of filmmaking, which is kind of funny because this is 1984 and you had Ghostbusters eventually released, but you've also Halloween, and then I guess they're trying to get into the comedic timeline of horror films because Jason was funny. How Friday the 13th, Freddy came out the same year.
But like, I think this movie's more of like it's like, you're more likely to probably show, your son, or I could show my daughter this before I'll show him Friday the 13th, right?
Yeah, but what I mean, it's kind of weird.
No, I know.
But it is what it is. This film had a lot of special effects and design, and that is mostly attributed to Chris Wallace. Chris Wallace was a special effects designer an artist, previously known for his work on films like Dragon Slayer and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and he headed the creature effects for Gremlins. Wallace was tasked with designing and fabricating fully articulated puppets capable of conveying personality, emotion, and humor without relying on non-existent CGI. And I think he hits it out of the ballpark in this film. Tone.
Yeah.
Gizmo is cute as shit. The other gremlins are ugly as hell. Even when they're still Mogwais, they still look mean, but they are awesome in the way they move around. The design phase involved numerous sketches and sculptures. Early on, the were imagined as adorable fur-covered creatures, while the Germans, while the gremlins were meant to look more reptilian and mischievous with the underlying sense of danger. The Mogwai, especially Gizmo, were initially meant to transform fully into gremlins early in the story. However, Spielberg decided to keep Gizmo as a companion throughout, requiring an especially sophisticated Mogwai puppet with a range of subtle facial expressions. The shift in the script demanded more complexity in animatronics, and that's pretty crazy because it looks like they're actually moving. When Gizmo is sitting on the sink when he's wrapping his head and his feet are moving, that's pretty cool. It looks like he's rocking back and forth. When the gremlins are hanging all over stuff, there's one breakdancing in the film. Is it Magua a band, Tony?
Yes. I'm pretty
Is it
sure.
based off the movie?
I don't know that deep here, but keep going here, and I'll give you the answer in 2 seconds here.
Okay, that's one of our people. My wife had asked in the comments. The gremlins, in contrast, were designed to be lankier and more predatory, with larger mouths, sharper teeth, and an overall menacing demeanor. Their design struck a balance, frightening yet comedic, and I think they pulled it off. For the construction and engineering of the puppets, materials, and mechanisms, each gremlin and Magua puppet combined multiple materials: foam, latex, skins for flexibility, mechanical civil motors, and cable pulls for facial movements. This is coming of the age stuff. This is something that wasn't used then. This is like really, really
1991 post-punk Scottish band named after the Gremlins character.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lightweight construction was crucial because they had to move around a lot, and they used various rubbers for this. The Mogwai heads, including Gizmo, contained some of the smallest mechanical components ever used in animatronics at the time. These components controlled ears, eyelids, brows, and mouths, allowing for a nuanced performance that mirrored a living creature's subtle reactions. And they had multiple versions for different shots for these. They had hero puppets, stunt puppets, and specialty puppets, all for this. So there's a team of puppeteers that also helped out on this. The complexity of Gizmo's expressions was a big thing. You had to convey a range of emotions: fear, sadness, curiosity, happiness. And the puppet's face contained a numerous of tiny motors and linkages to make it do that, which I think is pretty crazy. They had forced perspective of scales to make everything look, bigger and smaller. And you had to do that with the lighting and the camera work. And there was a limited use of stop motion and other tricks for a few shots that helped, make the background look cool, to making sure it looked real. It's just all this was combined. So much work was put into this film. You had to have a bigger budget for it to make this film work. And like we said earlier, this film holds up today, and the way it looks, like a lot of the cool things that happen within, the Gremlins and the Mogwais is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really honestly, tell honestly in the animatronics. I mean, you feel like, again, which I think all great movies are, is like there's a camera on this piece of life and it looks real. It looks like you could see it in a town, and that's what I think is great in the animatronics in this.
Yeah. Now to the soundtrack and scoring, my man, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, again, another really, really, really awesome score. I mean, getting started, I mean, what's the first thing you think about when you think of the Gremlin score personally?
The
I mean, yeah, I mean, earlier, which if you have not caught it yet, please check out the show, because the hookup on music, because I do a really, 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 really good job singing that one again. But Jerry Goldsmith, who does the full score for Gremlins, really, honestly, I'm not sure if I've told you the story, but in college, me and 3 friends took a road trip to California, And one of the guys had befriended someone on the internet who just happened to be Jerry Goldsmith's son. So the four of us find ourselves outside of Jerry Goldsmith's mansion in Hollywood, and honestly, in Beverly Hills. And honestly, I'm a very empathetic person. So just standing there, because the son lived on like one of those little houses on the outside of the big mansion. Because at this point, Jerry had sadly already passed away. It was 2004. And we went out there like 2005, like right around after the White Sox won the World Series, I remember. So how he met this guy was just on some web board on the internet. And they met over a mutual of just liking cool movies like this. And by coincidence, his dad was Jerry Goldsmith. And this is honestly, I don't got any really stories like this besides this. But back to the soundtrack, though, Jerry Goldsmith a little bit has done just so many movies, from LA Confidential and The Mummy to all 3 Rambo films, 5 Star Trek films. He has just really 18 Academy Awards. Just a really excellent musical producer. And when you get to the Gremlins soundtrack, you're pretty much not going to be, disappointed, because from front to back, it is loaded with just lots of good songs that pull the whole entire movie together. You talk about the scene when, like at the end, when everything's starting to break down and they're all going crazy, you don't have the soundtrack there. You are missing, what's the word I'm looking for? You're missing quite a lot of the importance of the movie, which we don't talk about enough. We didn't, we went deep on, The Godfather, and maybe I should go back and do some of this for some of the ones that we've covered already, because the music itself, if it's not part of that movie, I think it does take a good chunk of the importance of the movie out. I wouldn't be able to do the da 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 if it wasn't able to be done. And I mean, the soundtrack was released June 8th, 1984. It was on Geffen record label, which has just had so many bands right off the top of my head. I think of Guns N' Roses, but Jerry Goldsmith again is the lead person. But a lot of different little cool things on this. There's one called The Gift, Make It Shine. But definitely what I like to do with a movie like Gremlins is sit down with the soundtrack and just kind of listen to it as a whole, apart from the actual movie, because you get a whole different kind of magic, and you can also imagine all the cool scenes along with it.
Yeah, definitely, man. It really is a classic soundtrack. The sound, the Gremlins theme is recognizable. I mean, we remember the first part of that, but it's like recognizable. If you hear it, you already know it's from Gremlins.
Oh yeah, I mean that's it. I really do. I mean, the more we're talking about it here, and I'm looking at these pictures, I constantly think of this more of a Christmas movie than Die Hard. Call me crazy, because it feels more. It is, the whole background is Christmas, so it's hard not to feel it. Like, I know it's, when we think of Christmas movies, we think of like, Miracle on 34th Street, but there is other sides to Christmas, darker sides, mischievous sides. I think this movie does a good job, and the music really elevates that.
Yeah, and actually, to be honest with you, the second film has good music too. I love the portrayal of New York when they sing about New York.
Okay.
That's probably one of my favorite parts of the film. Just like even when they do the female gremlin, which was weird addition to it. Music that goes in the background of that is pretty cool. It's kind of like a I Love Lucy-ish, the music they have for her in there. But I really enjoy, even when they have Little Gizmo dance.
Well, it's cool is that, for this movie, is that Dante was worked with Goldsmith on Twilight Zone the movie, which you've covered before. And what it was he asked him to come back. That was their first collaboration, and this was the second time. At the same time, which is cool because we talked about earlier about Carpenter, and we talked about Escape from New York. This is like Goldsmith is starting to experiment with analog synthesizers and combinations of different electronics. So what he did was he put together a total of 8 synthesizers, a drum machine, a digital polyphonic sequencer, and the score reads like a who's who of classic 80s synths. So when you really sit down and think about it, you're getting in the soundtrack every synth at the time that was in the popular music too, because he was doing that much, along with the DMX drum machine, which is really kind of cool when you think about it.
Joey P agrees with you. It's definitely a Christmas movie.
Yes.
Awesome breakdown of the score and soundtrack, my man.
Yes. Thank you.
You want to get into the film breakdown?
Please, let's do it. I'm excited.
See the arc? He starts down here. He ends up here. Where's my arc, Paulie?
So just a heads up and disclaimer, most of these clips I'm going to play are going to be visual. There are not really many quotable scenes from this film. I guess if you want to count Howie Mandel, who does play voice Gizmo, as that sound, or the Gizmo Kaka sound as quotable. But I do have one sound clip that I will play, but most of them are going to be visual. So if you want to check those out, check out the YouTube. We will explain them, though, as we go through them. But the film opens up with Ram Peltzer, who's played by Hoyt Axton, and he's doing a voiceover, kind of like making this a storybook kind of tone, framing that it's like a fable, giving us that lead in. We see him going down, it looks like he's in Chinatown of a major city. Mostly, we probably think it's probably LA, is what it looks like. It's mysterious, it's exotic, it's mystical. They try to do this a lot in the 80s when it came to, Asian culture. It was mystical. And he even kind of did it in Big Trouble in Little China. It was a mystical area. And this one's a little bit more darker and like darker scene. But the crazy thing is the Chinatown sequence was shot on a Warner Bros. Backlot, and the street fog and dim lighting create a moody, like noirish, noir-ish contrasting. And a lot of the sets were used from other films, which I thought was pretty cool for this one. But we see him go down into a shop, and he's searching for a Christmas gift for his son. And he meets Mr. Wing, who's played by Kylie Luke, and his grandson. Rand is looking for a unique Christmas present, and he then tries to sell his invention to Mr. Wing, which is basically a thing that holds all your stuff for shaving cream, and it's like you're basically a traveling bathroom set that when he tries to show him the toothbrush, it sprays in his mouth that shows it's broken. He's like, I can fix this. I can get 12 of them here for you. And Mr. Wing ain't going for it. But as he continues to talk to him, he begins to hear this sound, and he starts to go towards the sound.
What is it?
Mogwai.
What's he doing?
Singing.
That theme that Gizmo sings is probably really, really recognizable as well. Apparently he sings that, which I think is hilarious. Later in the film, he plays it on a keyboard. For the character of Mr. Wing, we had Kylie Luke, who is included in a lot of roles on Charlie Chan films. His calm, measured performance contrasts Rand's enthusiasm and sets the tone for the Mogwai's significance as an ancient creature with rules. He is stereotypically like, that's the only thing, is a stereotypical Chinatown character. He's smoking a pipe. It's the 80s. I mean, it's not politically correct the way, I'm serious, the way they made him, but he's
I never thought of
like
it
opium, and he has like a
right.
white eye, a long beard. It's very like stereotypical, but when Rand sees this character, he wants to buy it. He offers $200, to which his
Should have used
grandson.
Egg Chen.
Yeah, Wing's Wing the
Wing Chi.
yeah, Wing Chi. Wing's grandson is more than happy to take the $200, but Mr. Wing tells him, "No, this is not for sale. It's a lot of responsibility for the Mogwai." So he's like heartbroken, but the grandson tells him, "Hey, just wait out back, and I'll meet you out there." To where he goes and sells him the uh Mogwai, man. He sells him the Mogwai without telling his grandfather. And the crazy thing is, Mogwai in Cantonese is for devil or demon.
Oh, yeah.
But they wanted to make it incredibly cute for this role. Again, he says it's too much responsibility. That this concept is the creature comes with moral and cultural weight is what they're trying to push. And then we finally find out the grandson secretly sells it to Rand. But before he leaves, the grandson tells him there are rules.
Look, mister, there's 3 rules you've got to follow.
Yeah, what kind of rules?
Keep him out of the light. He hates bright light, especially sunlight. It'll kill him. And keep him away from water. Don't get him wet. But the most important rule, the rule you can never forget, no matter how much he cries, no matter how much he begs, never, never feed him after midnight. You got it?
Sure, kid. Whatever you say. Hey, listen, thanks. And have a Merry Christmas.
And then we kind of cut into like a story, like it kind of like fades out, and then we go into the town of Kingston Falls, a fictional all-American small town, draped in like Christmas decorations. It's kind of like Francis Carpa-esque setting. The town square is set as the same as Back to the Future, but dressed completely differently. Snow covers the streets. There's Hollywood cheer everywhere, providing a stark contrast from where he just was. The film was mostly shot on a Universal backlot, especially the courthouse square, set made famous by numerous films such as the Back to the Future films. We then meet Billy, who's played by Zach Gilligan. He's trying to start his car, and it's still covered with snow. So I guess he was gonna clean it off as it started, which makes no sense. He just cleaned the shit off now. And he's trying to start his car, it won't start. His neighbor's there, Mr. Murray, who's telling him about his truck and cab, and then he complains about foreign cars because it won't start. So Billy decides to walk to work. As he walks to work, he takes his dog with him, which I think is strange. Like he takes his dog. He's a teller at a bank, Tone. And he puts his dog in his desk below him. Like there's a little opening, and he puts like a little rope around his dog. And like, what if his dog has to use the bathroom? What the hell's he gonna do?
It's pretty cruel. I was curious what I'm just kidding. What certain animal rights groups think about that?
They could, man. They could. But while Billy's in the bank, we see the character of Phoebe Cates' character in there as Kate. She kind of gives him a glance, and then we see the character of Mrs. Daigle, who is introduced in a pretty horrible way. A mom is saying that she can't afford to pay on her real estate, and Mrs. Daigle basically tells her this.
Harris, the bank and I have the same purpose in life: to make money, not to support a lot of deadbeats.
And then she goes on to tell her, she's like, Mrs. Daigle, it's Christmas. And she's like, well, now you know what to ask Santa for. Miss Daigle was not fucking around, man. She gave no F.
Dropping bombs, man.
Yeah, and she's like a landowner of the area. She also goes inside to tell, she's carrying a statue, a head of a snowman, and she's just banging into people. She runs to the front of the line. I thought when I first saw this film, I thought she owned the bank, but she's just a realtor. She like bangs the guy out, like knocks him out of the way, the guy in line, and that's talking to Billy. And she starts saying that his dog did that. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I'll pay for it. And she's like, I don't want your money. Just give me your dog, and I'll take him to the kennel and put him to sleep. Unless I catch him, then I'm gonna kill him. And like she was vicious.
She was.
Billy's just like, yeah. And then his dog goes apeshit because he hears all these things, because I guess the dog can understand English perfectly. And he runs around and leaves there, and he gets yelled at by his boss for this. But we do see kind of like that relationship building between him and Kate prior to this, as she's kind of telling him that she's doing a drive for somebody that's losing their property that Mrs. Daigle is trying to take over. So she's established as kind of like the asshole of the town hall. And like you said, Tony, she plays the part perfectly.
Definitely. I mean, just that whole scene is memorable in so many ways. And I'll never forget for the rest of my life your vocal impressions of her right there. That was
Oh yeah. Yeah, she's funny, man. And then we cut to Billy going home. His mom's upset about something, but she doesn't really tell him what it is. We see a bunch of his dad's inventions. One of them is a damn chicken who's supposed to crack open the eggs that doesn't work. He also has a juicer for orange juice that explodes. Coffee machine explodes. You see him like building a hammer that just like hammers. It reminds me of like Homer Simpson, the episode of The Simpsons when he builds all the inventions that suck.
yeah.
And that's kind of foreshadowing to, the recurring theme of technology gone awry is foreshadowing how the Gremlins represent chaos. And that's why kind of the way they put that in there into the film. But his dad does come home while the mom is going to tell him what's going on, but then she decides not to. And he has a little gift for our boy Billy.
You're kidding.
And that is the first appearance of what Gizmo looked like. And I can see why this thing sold out in stores in terms of it's a cute thing. I mean, it's something that my dog probably would want to chew up as a toy, but it's a cute little creature there.
No, you're absolutely right. And if I'm not mistaken, I swear I had one like when I was 7 or 8. I could remember what it looked like too and everything. And he was awesome.
Yeah, and that's where we first learned that his name is Gizmo because his dad said that he doesn't have a name, but he's been calling him Gizmo. And then he tells him there's 3 rules. Remember, you gotta keep him away from bright light because he might die, especially sunlight. Don't let him get wet. Never feed him after midnight. So I always thought about this midnight thing. What if you feed him and it's like daylight savings time?
That's very interesting. Is he named Gizmo because of the machines that the guy makes?
I think that's probably why he named him because he's an inventor.
That's pretty cool. I never honestly have thought about that at all. That's cool.
Yeah, I think that's why he named him. The 3 rules became a pop culture touchstone. They reflect the story's folkloric nature and set up the plot's central conflicts. We then see Billy bonding with Gizmo. He's doing that little song, and Billy's playing on a keyboard, and Gizmo starts playing with them, which I think is kind of cool. Tom, don't you wish you had a creature like that to help you?
Oh my geez, man. He would do more videos than both of us put together.
Yeah, and again, Howie Mandel does do the voice of Gizmo, but apparently Howie Mandel does not like being told to do Gizmo or Bobby's World. Which so if you have an interview with Howie Mandel, I've heard that he tells the people, "I am not going to talk about either of those films."
Dude. Oh wow,
Which is kind of crazy. He has such detailed, facial expressions, and we explained like the animatronics actually had a lot to do with that. He's also extremely smart. And see, I understand we have to put this in like a perspective of fantasy, but the way this guy Billy treats this character, this Gizmo, it's like if I was in there, I'd be like, "What the hell is this?" Like, it's not any animal I've ever seen. It's extremely smart. So what the hell is it? Like, I mean,
well, that is very fair. But the thing about it is the way it looks compared to the other ones. I think that's in any movie. If you could take any monster, make a cute one, and then make a bunch of ugly ones and put them next to them, and you're gonna have people be like, "Oh, look at the cute one." You do this with any breed, and that's pretty much they hit it out of the park with that idea here.
yeah, and we have the first introduction of Pete. He was earlier in the film. He was dressed as a Christmas tree at his dad's Christmas tree lot. He comes over to bring over the family's Christmas tree. And again, prior to this, we see Billy try to drink some orange juice the next morning, and that's where it explodes all over the kitchen. And Pete tells him, "Didn't your dad fix that?" And he goes, "Yeah." So apparently, Mr. Peltzer is really bad at his inventions. But Billy's friend comes over and he shows him the Mogwai. And and he really wants one. He's like, "Oh, can I have one too?" And he's like, "Well, there's only one I have, and I don't. It's only one I've ever seen." He has to hold him, and he says, "Sure." And while he tries to go hold him, he spills water on him because, of course. And poor Gizmo lays on his back. These balls, furry balls, split out of his back, and creates these little guys. So he multiplies, and the one I just showed you is a Spike, who is a Mogwai that is distinguished by his white mohawk, are mischievous and grumpy looking. As you can see, when Pete tries to pet him, he tries to bite him. Yeah, Spike don't mess around. Again, the animatronics in this scene are awesome as the other, Mogwais are there and they're moving around. It's really, really cool. It looks like they're really there, really alive animals. Uh, Now there's multiple other Mogwais, and you could tell Gizmo's uncomfortable around them, which I think is pretty hilarious. We see them, and like they're to me, that's another thing too. Like, if I saw something multiply off a drop of water, I'd be like, "Holy shit, this has got to be an alien." But apparently, in this world, especially in this small town, they've seen crazier shit than this, uh, which I thought was pretty crazy, But they apparently don't know about it and don't care. What would you be doing at this time, Tone?
Oh, I would be very nervous and scared because anything popping off of somebody's back like that with balls and looking like that, especially in 1984. I mean, today I wouldn't be probably as scared. I'd be like, oh well, another day here, another day at work. But back then, yeah, pretty scary.
Yeah, and then it cuts to Billy walking down the street, passing a bar that his girl, well, it's not his girlfriend yet, but Kate works at, and we see Mr. Murray and they're hammered. And he's getting into his car, and this is the first time we hear this dialogue.
You got to watch out for the foreigners because they plant gremlins in their machinery. That's the same gremlins brought down our planes in the big one.
And if for those who don't know, Gremlin was actually in the Twilight Zone film, with the gremlin on the plane, and actually in the original with the gremlin on the plane, there are little creatures that tinker and destroy things, and Mr. Murray believes in foreign cars, they do that. I do appreciate that they talk him out of driving his car, because when I was watching it again, I was like, "Are they really gonna let this guy drive home?" But they did not. They told him to walk home, and he did. And we find out that most of the people in the town are losing their jobs, and they kind of cope with, Christmas and holidays by drinking. And Billy, who is oblivious to all this, says, "Oh, I thought Christmas time was for happiness." And Phoebe Cates' character tells him, "Well, not for everyone." And it's kind of true. Like, not everybody's happy around the holidays because either they're missing someone or, it's just a tough time for them. And some of them are barely making ends meet. It's difficult time. And she kind of gives a little bit about her, background by saying she doesn't celebrate Christmas, but she doesn't go too much into it from their tone. I thought this brought a lot more like realism to the holidays. Like, they're not always chipper for everybody.
No, no, and it's again a movie that is mixing different kind of feelings. And this is another one that, well, makes you think because it's true. And that's why sometimes I don't like some of the ones that are super positive because it seems almost too fake. And I know I watch a lot of movies that are fake, but it even seems more fake than a movie like Predator. But that's just me.
Yeah. So after he walks home, he comes back, and I love the little subtle like hints they have. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that tone, Joey, later on. But I love the little subtle hints they put in here because he's watching Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The earlier film is what's on TV. Him and Gizmo are watching this. Well, Gizmo's actually looking at 3D, whatever, something 3D that he gave him. And he's asking him, "Is it cool?" And he answers him back. And I'm like, "Dude, like, what animal do you know answers you back?" Like that. Like, he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, oh, it's just normal, whatever." I digress. But they're watching the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and the other Mogwais are in a box, and they're screaming for food. They want food really bad. And Billy's looks at the clock and he's like, I already fed you, and it's before midnight. So he goes and gets them some chicken. And man, they eat like little monsters, man. It's so disgusting when they eat. And like he tries to offer Gizmo some, and Gizmo says no. So it's kind of showing that Gizmo is still a good, he's innocent, because we find out later that the Gremlins the Mogwais have tricked Billy. They basically broke his clock, and now it wasn't 11 before 12. It was actually after. And during this time, we also see Billy had gone and taken a Mogwai to his science teacher, Mr. Hansen, and Mr. Hansen took blood from a Gremlin or a Mogwai that had multiplied because Billy dropped water on him, which why didn't you just bring one of the other ones instead of dropping water on him? But again, I digress. So Mr. Hansen was eating a sandwich, and apparently he doesn't clean up his station, because once he said he was going to sleep, the Mogwai in the cage started eating his sandwich, which made kind of no sense. But when they wake up in the morning, they find these things all over.
What are they?
What are
they? Yeah, again, ode to Invasion of Body Snatchers. You get like some alien vibes from them. The pods, they were designed and influenced by horror films and were made with latex and fibrous materials. The presence adds like more of a monster movie quality to the film, which I thought really does. I thought they looked cool. They're disgusting, and I think Corey Feldman mentions that Pete as they're talking to Mr. Hansen about it. He's like, "Oh, they're in their cocoon phase. They're in their metamorphosis phase." And he's like, "What my mom's going through," and of course, she's going through menopause. He's like, "No," but we see them. Eventually, Billy is at work and he has to deal again with Mrs. Daigle, who tells him she's going to kill his dog again. And luckily for him, Dad's taking the dog to Grandma's. But they're starting to hatch. They start to hatch actually in the school, and Mr. Hansen calls Billy and says, "Hey, it just hatched." Well, while that's going on, they're hatching at his house as well, in his mom's home. So the crazy thing is, Mr. Hansen decides to offer this creature something to eat, a chocolate bar. And we don't see the creature, we just hear it. And it's going yum as it's eating a chocolate bar, and it bites Mr. Hansen and eventually kills him. So it's the first kill, and the scene was supposed to be more graphic and more, very, very horrific. But they wanted to keep the PG 13 tone, so they made it less violent, and they kind of had it more with just you hearing the noises and the shadows of him. We don't see what the transformation is yet. The crazy thing is, when Billy shows up at the school, because Mr. Hansen called him to tell him that they hatched, he sees Mr. Hansen dead with a shot in his ass, like a syringe, because he gave a syringe to take the blood of the Mogwai, and he was pissed. But he doesn't report it. He gets scratched as he tries to reach for the phone. I guess he was trying to, but the Gremlin scratches him, and he runs into the medical area of the school. And this is where we finally see the first glimpse. Oh my goodness, Tony! The first glimpse of bless you, of the Gremlin. What did you think when you first saw that?
It was awesome. Again, now though, I'm thinking about you talking about reporting it. I never thought about that. Now I'm going to overthink that part. He should have still reported that, what he had seen.
Yeah, so we see that he runs out, runs away. He runs home because that creature tried to get him. He runs home, and when he runs home, he tells us to finds his mom is actually in a battle with these creatures, and they're in her kitchen. And Lynn Peltzer does not fuck around, man. She goes and stabs the shit out of that gremlin. Like, she literally stabs him. Another one falls into the juicer, and then another one attacks her, and she throws him in the microwave.
That's funny.
Which is pretty hilarious, the scene that's happening right here. Yeah, she is a badass. She doesn't care. She goes in there, and then she hears another one in the Christmas tree area, and it's in the Christmas tree and it attacks her. Billy happens to come home and save her. Yeah, it was saying yum yum, Joey. Billy happens to come home and save her and chops its head off into the fireplace. But before he could do so, it scratches her on the face. The sword hanging by the door was a deliberate Chekhov's gun introduced early to pay off in a heroic moment. So it was initially put there. But that whole fight scene, like the kitchen scene tone, like what'd you think about all that?
Excellently choreographed, let's put it that way, with the mechanical gremlins and um, you know, doing a really good job. Lynn doing an excellent job, handling herself with the gremlins too. Good knife swinging action. Alfred Hitchcock would have been happy.
Yeah. During all this battling, after Billy saves her, she gets a scratch on her face. He's trying to tend to her, and we see Stripe looking at them, pissed off, and breaks the window and runs away. Billy takes Gizmo. He takes his mom to the doctor, comes back to the house, and comes back and finds Gizmo in the laundry chute, and he's normal, so he puts him in a book bag. And they go look for Stripe, who escapes to the YMCA. There, he scratches Billy, and Stripe's like, you know what? I don't give a shit. I'm jumping in the water. And the pool effect, the rolling, glowing green light, was achieved with practical effects. It was actually really cool looking. I couldn't get a good video shot of it for the pod, but it looks really, really cool. It's done with dry ice, and it's like a subtle effect, but it's an effective way of showing like
awesome.
Spike reproduce or replicate. When he jumps in the pool, like it's funny because he does a cannonball and then he starts like going spazzing out really crazily. Billy says, "I'm not dealing with this," and he runs away. And during this, we see that the gremlins are starting to take over the town. While this is going on, he finally goes to the police officers. I don't hear him say anything about Mr. Hanson getting killed, but the police officers there are drunk. He shows them Gizmo and they think he's cute. While this is going on, gremlins are on top of rooftops, they're on top of antennas, they're messing with traffic lights, and eventually they go to the Futtermans, which is actually, I called him Mr. Murray earlier, but his name is Futterman, Mr. Futterman. The gremlins hijack Mr. Futterman's snowplow as he thinks that his TV's all messed up, and they break into his house with his snowplow, and he does this. He screams and screams, "Oh my god, there's a gremlin in here!" And they try to run him over. We don't see what happens to the Futtermans until the sequel, but Dick Miller was a favorite again of Joe Dante, and he is hilarious in here. A part of the film when he's screaming about that. Another part that really cracks me up is Mrs. Daigle is in the house with her cat, and she gets a nice little introduction to the gremlins as well.
Great.
It's hilarious how they go and start singing Christmas carols to her, which is like, how did I know about singing Christmas carols? But whatever. But she gets scared. She runs in the house, sits on her little seat, that goes up and down stairs, and they basically turbo boosted it, and she flies out the damn window, and she dies in front of the police officers. Who are like, "That's Mrs. Daigle." Well, no shit. The police officers again are chased by the gremlins. They're setting on fires everywhere. We then cut to the bar that Kate works at Dory's Tavern, and we see the gremlins doing all sorts of bad and naughty things in there.
That's my favorite scene, probably.
Yeah, the scene where they're all dancing. They're doing there's flash dance outfits. They're smoking, drinking, and the part that cracks me up is Kate is working and like sliding their cigarettes. Like how? What? I felt like I would like ran out of there, but she's apparently serving them, and then she starts taking pictures with her camera to get them away. Which I don't know how she knew sunlight worked, or flashes worked, but she starts doing that. They start backing out. She almost gets shot by one of them. And then somehow Billy comes in to save her, and they run away. I don't know if Billy has a sixth sense or whatnot, but he came in there to save her. And they run away to an area at the bank actually they run to, where she reveals the tragic story of her father. She says her dad didn't come home for Christmas one day on Christmas Eve, and her mom called him, and he never called back or came in. And after days, they were looking for him. They didn't find him. They were worried. Finally, it was very extremely cold in the house, and she says that's when she noticed the smell in her chimney, and they called the fire department.
I'm expecting them to pull out a dead cat or a bird, and instead they pulled out my father.
Apparently, her dad wanted to dress as Santa. Joey says that the Gremlins look like a post game at Clork and Carrie's. Yeah, it's kind of true how packed it is in there. Her dad wanted to dress up as Santa and meet them with some presents, but he slipped in the chimney and broke his neck going down it and died instantly. And he was stuck in there. That's why he wasn't making any calls. But it's tragic, but it's also hilarious. And
well, yeah, it is. No, I mean, it's, imagine somebody doing that, you or me, or
yeah, it's so we know why she hates Christmas, because her dad died as Santa. So that kind of explains that. As they go on, they're looking for the Gremlins to try to take them out, and they notice them at a film theater. This is my favorite part telling of the film, because they're just like dancing around in the theater, eating popcorn and going apeshit. And there's like millions of Gremlins. Not maybe millions, but at least a couple hundred of them.
Enough. I get
Yeah. And I love the scene of them just singing to Snow White's Seven Dwarfs. They're singing Hi Ho. They're all like jamming there. So Billy and Kate go in there with Gizmo, and they go behind the screen, and they go down the trap door, and they set the gas off to try to kill all them. They are noticed by the Gremlins, and I love the aesthetic and the scene as when the Gremlins realize that they're actually behind the theater projector, and they run towards the screen, and you see like their images coming through the screen and tearing it apart. They kind of did it in part 2 with the Hulk Hogan thing.
Yeah.
But I really like the way it looked in this film. They come after them, they run away, they close the door. Unfortunately for them, Stripe had to go across the street to get some candy, so he's not in the movie theater at this time. But their plan works, as Billy had lit some paper on fire, which again is not how it really works. It's not going to fill up that fast. But the theater blows up, and all the Gremlins in there die, except Stripe, who is eating candy and happens to see them, like the place burning down, while he has all this candy in his hand. And he notices Billy, and Billy notices him with Kate, and they're like, okay, we got to go in there and get him. And they go into the department store, and to get away, Stripe actually goes on a skateboard with all this candy, which is hilarious. Billy goes in there after him, and while they're in there, Stripe gets the better of him, man. He knocks him down into basically a display. He shoots some arrows into his arm, and he's shooting arrows at him as he's holding up a radio trying to block it. He comes at him with a chainsaw. Billy blocks it with a bat, and then Gizmo tries to save the day in this cool scene where he's actually driving a car.
Great.
Throughout this whole time, like, Billy's dad's trying to get home from this convention, and that's a whole other great scene. It's like a subplot. It's nothing, but he's trying to get home from the convention, and like you have like the machine from Lost in Space in there talking to him. It's basically an adventures convention, and he has a dog bringing it home. Well, he happens to be passing by while this is going on, and Billy sees Spike go into an area that has water, and he's calling him. Spike's like mocking him, saying, "Billy," he's going to jump into the water. Also, the dog runs in to attack the Gremlin, but he sees Gizmo in the car and follows him to where Spike is shooting at Billy with a gun. Like, these Gremlins have some good ass aim for creatures. He's shooting at him, and Gizmo saves the day by opening up the light, letting sunlight come in and hit Spike, which eventually kills him. But he does have a good jump scare that happens. I thought the scene was pretty cool. Yeah, with when the skull comes out of the water and it dissolves, it's really really good, cool practical effects. It gives you like a jump scare.
Yeah. I mean, the movie does mix, uh, some lights. I'd call them light scares with
Mhm.
some jump moments, but it overall just a cool vibe.
Yeah, and again, the melting effect is a standout practical gag. It was done with latex goo and stop motion. Like we mentioned, stop motion in the puppeteering earlier. It's to me, it's really awesome. I really like that part. I think it's hilarious that the Gremlins know how to shoot guns.
Yeah, that's funny.
But they do, and we think everything's all cool. The dad arrives. He sees that he acts like it's normal. Takes them home. Gizmo's sitting on the couch. They're under a fire with Kate, Gizmo, the dad, and Billy, who's in his arms in a sling because he got shot with an arrow. And the mom's like, "Oh, I'll make Gizmo some chicken soup." But Mr. Wing comes in and he's like, "Fuck that! I'm taking my Mogwai back." He throws the money back at the dad and says that he wasn't ready for the responsibility. And he basically like scolds them. But the part where he is talking, I guess he's talking to Gizmo in either Cantonese or Mandarin. I don't I don't speak the language, but Gizmo's understanding, and he tells him, "Oh, he has something to tell you." He like changes the demeanor, and Gizmo tells Billy, "Bye, bye, Billy." And the dad cements this, apology that he gives to him with the smokeless ashtray that he tried to sell a guy at the gas station, who eventually sold it to, that didn't work, and he tries to give it to Mr. Wang, who says, "Oh, I know what this is. It's a smokeless ashtray. Guy at the gas station tried to sell it to me." But I appreciate your novelty and your apology. Uh, during this whole thing, Tom, they're watching a film, not a film, but the newscast that's talking about little green men destroying the town. And again, Mr. Wing scolds them for that. But this movie ends with Gizmo leaving and Mr. Wing walking down basically a dark like street with the moon shining on them. And again, we hear Mr. Pelter give a voiceover saying, "Check your electronics because there might be some gremlins in there." And the film ends. Pretty sweet film. It's not slow pace. It pretty much is paced very well. It keeps you engaged. Has a lot of funny scenes in it, and I really enjoyed it. I watched it today before we had our show again, and still like it to this day.
Yeah, I mean, it's a movie that I think till the end of time or I'm here on this planet, it just plays constantly in my head. I watch it, but then when I don't watch it, it's still playing because I've seen it so many times. Um, Gonna watch it again this weekend. It really does show a different side of Christmas in a way that maybe guys like me and you enjoy. It shows it's got a little sentimental things, it's got the horror aspect, it's got snow, it's got a little of all of it.
Yeah, definitely. Uh, like I said, the puppeteering and the practical effects are awesome. I'm a big practical effect person. CGI is okay, but I prefer like the old way of doing it. I know it's a little harder, but I think it just looks better aesthetically. Even now, it looks a lot better if it's practical than it is CGI, because
You
that stuff doesn't age well.
you would have loved the conversation that happened in the classroom. I put on the original Frosty the Snowman from
Mm.
1951, which is stop animation, and I had half of the kids screaming that it looks stupid, and half the kids were like, "How genius is this? Think of 1951." Which that's, again, I think of that too, because you see a lot of stuff that comes out now, and it looks like hot, 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 hot garbage. And then now look at this movie that's been, you know, here we are,
31 years.
yeah, celebrating it.
Yeah, it's a 30-year anniversary of it.
Yep.
But yeah, still a classic. Shout out to our man Joey P, who tweeted out when this movie came on Max. Gotta start Christmas time. We're watching Gremlins.
Yes.
So he gave us kind of the idea to do it. But that is the film breakdown. Hopefully, I didn't ramble on too much there. Again, if you want to check out the scenes I played, check out the YouTube. That's Disc Penguin YouTube. Man, Phoebe Cates is like super pretty in this film.
She sure is. Kevin Kline is a lucky man to be married to her.
Yeah. She was like the heartthrob of the 80s.
She was.
Um,
You
so-
ever see Private School?
No.
Watch Private School. It's the follow-up to Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Oh, is it?
Oh yeah.
Is it the sequel?
No, but it's like
Similar
Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
She's in there?
Yeah. Yep.
All right, I'll check it out.
Especially if you like Phoebe Cates.
I do. I mean, she's hilarious in Fast Times, not just for the part that everybody loves, but
I know. No,
she's hilarious.
She does a good job in the other movie too.
I love when she talks about her professor boyfriend. She calls him an asshole.
The male star in the movie, which you're going to hilarious, is Matthew Modine.
Oh man, Matthew Modine,
which is ridiculous movie. But yeah, Phoebe Cates is awesome.
Matthew Modine, Stranger Things. But Tom, let's get into how this was received by the critics, my man.
Let's do it.
You know that fat cocksucker says I look like the Shah of Iran?
Who does? Tony. I never got that at all.
So the film had a budget of $11 million and made $165 million worldwide. So it was a blockbuster hit. Some of the positive reviews came from our boy Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times. He said, it's a mediation in the midst of Christmas, and at the same time, an effective comedy horror film. He gave it 3 out of 4 stars, appreciating its originality and the balance of humor and scares, though he acknowledged it had some uneasiness and unevenness in it. Richard Seckel of the Time magazine said, at once scary and witty, stylish and submersive, it's a horror fable with heart. He embraced the film's clever mix of whimsy, I can't say that word, and wickedness, combining its inventive approach to genre blending. Gene Siskel, our man Gene Siskel, actually had something positive to say about this film. He's from the Chicago Tribune. He says, when Gremlins works, it's hilarious poke at the American dream gone awry.
See, right there, I gotta read deeper into that quote, because when and maybe this is me reading into it more, when he goes, when Gremlins works, is he saying there's times in the movie it does not work?
Yes. So if those who live in the Chicagoland area, Gene Siskel is Dan Bernstein. That's basically the same character. I love Gene Siskel.
Yeah.
He's basically Dan Bernstein. Siskel admired the film's dark humor and satirical edge, although he also noted that the film didn't consistently maintain its balance. So that's when he said that's when he calls it to work.
I know, yeah.
Pauline Kael, the New Yorker, said it's a savage joke, a crack at Christmas cliches, and a nifty special effects showcase. She appreciated the submersive nature of the film and the technical artistry used in it, especially with the creatures. And then we have some mixed reviews. Vincent Canby of the New York Times says Gremlins has its moments, but it's essentially a confused film, widely uneven in tone. He said that he enjoyed certain aspects, but felt the shifts from horror to comedy were jarring. I wonder what he said about the films today. David Denby of New York Magazine said the grotesque violence visited upon the holiday cheer feels mean-spirited and overdone. There's not grotesque violence except to the Gremlins, but okay. Denby criticized the film's tonal whiplash and found its darker elements excessive and at odds with the festive setting. That's the whole point of it, David. Okay. A Variety, a trade publication, they didn't even have an author for this, but they said it was sophisticated special effects showcased marred by tonal inconsistencies. They said they appreciated the craftsmanship and effects, but believed the film struggled to smoothly blend its comedic, horrific, and sentimental ingredients. I disagree.
I know you hate this movie a lot, but there's this quote that I love. It's in the beginning of the Doors Oliver Stone movie when they're watching this movie, and it's like Morrison does like a movie for the school, and everyone's like, it was really boring, and someone in the audience is like, you need your art spoon-fed to you. That's what these people need, their art spoon-fed to us, because tonal shifts are off. What are we watching?
It's funny that you say it's spoon-fed to, because I watched The Big Bang Theory the other day. It's good, Brian. Fogo de Chao is really good. And it's the when they were playing Pictionary, and he's like, "Come on, Leonard, I am spoon feeding this to you." And it was like a picture of Madame Curie when she died of uranium,
yes.
discovering uranium. So it's funny that you say that.
That's
But
funny.
Leonard Melton said that from the Leonard Melton's movie guide, said that nasty little creatures destroy everything in their path except your appetite for absurdity. He acknowledged the film's wicked humor, but felt the nastiness of the gremlins might put off some viewers, highlighting its dark tone as a mixed blessing. So he kind of gave like a middle of the ground review. But those other reviews, some positive, some mixed, some I think totally missed the mark on it. And that's not just me saying that. But I also do have a hindsight view of the film, but I can understand how they felt in the 80s at this time. Tony, on the other hand, thinks they're full of shit. But this film did have a big impact on special effects and animatronics. The Mogwai and the Gremlins, created under Chris Wallace's supervision, showcased new levels of the animatronics, and we, kind of put that into the beginning in the development of the film. There was hybrids effects used in this, like I explained, the mechanical little intricacies of the faces. It basically brought a whole new game to animatronics and to creature features that eventually would, eventually keep going and evolving. It had an influence on the film industry and ratings. The MPAA rating system changes. Along with the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Gremlins played a critical role in the creation of the PG-13 rating in the United States. Its combination of family-centric marketing and unexpectedly intense scenes prompted the Motion Picture Association of America to refine the rating system. So that's why we have PG-13. So PG-13 opened the door for more in-between content, allowing filmmakers greater flexibility in exploring darker or more intense material without targeting a strictly adult audience. And this film, go ahead, Tom.
No, that's very interesting. I also think that's crazy because Tim Burton, you would have thought Adventures of Pee Wee Herman. What's the first one? The
Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Yeah, that's only rated PG. So I wonder if Tim Burton could have made this movie actually PG because he made that movie PG.
Yeah, but maybe it was the clown part that scared kids away.
It could have been.
Steven Spielberg's producer power, produced by Spielberg's Ambient Entertainment. Gremlins reinforced Spielberg's influence on the 1980s cinema, where projects he endorsed were given considerable studio trust and marketing support. Again, it's just another winner for Spielberg and his entertainment. It gave a wave of 1980s ambient-esque films that blended the elements of fantasy, suburban Americana, coming-of-age stories, and a gentle horror story with it. This became part of Hollywood's cinematic language of the decade, and we kind of see that going forward. You get Goonies, another Spielberg film, kind of has some horror aspect in there, with a little more, I guess, fantasy with the Pirates of One-Eye Willie. You get Monster Squad in there. That's horror with kids. So you kind of get that going through in the 80s. Lost Boys, perfect example of horror and comedy. You get that going through that kind of genre. Again, it grossed over 150 million on a modest budget, and it was a commercial hit. And its merchandising success, particularly through Gizmo plush dolls, spurred studios to consider revenue streams more seriously through merchandising, laying groundwork for heavy tie-in merchandising on future family genre hybrids. So, like when Ninja Turtles came out, that film was pushed heavily through merchandising. Ghostbusters heavily through merchandising. Ghostbusters 2 heavily through merchandising. That's all because this film opened up the door for that, which I thought was pretty cool. You had a bunch of media spin-offs and you have a sequel. Sequel Gremlins 2, we talked about a little bit, a new batch in 1990. It was the first and most notable follow-up and direct sequel to the film. It was released in 1990, again, directed by Joe Dante. You have canceled reboots. There was various attempts at a third film or reboot has been discussed. If you go to IMDb, there is a Gremlins 3 there. However, it says it's in production. So that usually means it's in production hell. I've heard whispers of it possibly getting made, but I don't know any of the details on that. There is this other show called the At the Little Show that might be coming out. that we will be discussing things like that. But there was a TV adaptation of the film called Gremlins: Secret of the Mogwai, an animated prequel series announced decades later and debuted on streaming platforms, demonstrating the franchise longevity and adaptability to new storytelling formats. Explores the Mogwai's origins and expands the universe in a serialized form, and I think that's kind of cool. You had video games. Several games were produced in the mid to late 80s and 90s, including titles for the Atari 2600, the Commodore 64, the NES, and various home computer systems. These games typically involve platforming or puzzle solving mechanics where you control Gizmo, reflecting the film's crossover appeal into interactive media. And although none of the games achieved landmark status in gaming history, their existence underscores, again, merchandising and licensing reach. Um, Beyond the films, Gremlins inspired comics, storybooks, lunchboxes, posters, and other tie-in products. The references to Gremlins has appeared in various media. We had it in The Simpsons. We had it in Goonies is talked about. Chunk talks about those little creatures that you put water on them and they multiply. The cop makes fun of them from that story, but it's Gremlins, and it's also a Steven Spielberg film and a Chris Columbus film. The long-term legacy of the film helped solidify the horror comedy as a commercial formula, which we said, and the film's legacy persists through regular home video releases, the special edition DVDs and Blu-rays, the streaming ability of it. It makes it, live on and gives it accessibility to viewers. And of course, again, the fact it was done without CGI. I don't think people like the younger generation understands how hard it is to do stuff like this. Like now we can put up, Adobe After Effects, you have, Vegas, those programs that can help you, 3D builders, even AI can help build some CGI for you. But back then it was all hands on. That's why I love Tom Savini so much, because the creatures he's built make him legendary. And his school was so popular. Yeah. So popular. His school was so popular. He's like the master of horror, and he's getting up there in age. And people who've graduated from school make the best practical effects in films.
That's true.
But that is the critical stuff, Tone. I have a fan theory for you here.
Oh, I've been waiting. It's been a while since we've done one of these.
Yeah,
I've been
so
losing sleep.
Let me take a drink of this water because this one's about 2 paragraphs.
It's gonna be a good one.
So this is from Tranarco Sid from Reddit, and he's in the Gremlins subreddit, a subreddit I'm actually a member of, shamelessly say. But this this actual post is named Gremlins Theory, Gizmo Stripe, and the Potential Backstory of the Gremlins. He starts off, okay, I have a theory about the events that preceded the first Gremlins movie. It's a very Gizmo and Stripe centric theory, but it holds value, kind of. We know that Gremlins are reincarnated in each generation. Each new generation, okay. We also know that Stripe appears to be the first in line to be reincarnated once all the Gremlins are eliminated except for Gizmo. We know both of these because multiple Gremlins are reincarnated in the second movie after being killed in the first movie, starting with Stripe. Is it like that? Or is it because it's from Gizmo? We also know that Gremlins themselves originated from Asia, or an Asianic region at least, because of the shopkeeper from the first movie who says that Mogwai come from his homeland. So here's my theory. Gizmo used to be the Gremlin warlord. It wouldn't surprise me if he was even the very first Gremlin, the spawn of vengeful demon from the east, created to teach humans lessons about gluttony and excess. Stripe would have been his second in command at his time, and likely his closest friend among the ranks. I suspect that what happened was, after amassing an army and turning them all from Mogwai to Gremlin, Gizmo probably ended up leading a campaign of terror and atrocities through several rural Asian communities centuries ago. Anytime any of them were killed by the humans they terrorized, they would simply be reincarnated. These horrors would have plagued the region for eons. But then Siddhartha Gautama came along, I don't know how to say that, a monk who spent 14 days meditating under a tree. I'm doing so. He created I'm doing so, he says, but I think he meant in doing so. He created a belief system that would revolutionize the world, which would eventually come to be known as Buddhism. Then a plan formed against the humans. They kidnapped Gizmo, and rather than simply kill him, they kidnapped another gremlin and held them both captive. Knowing that Gizmo was the leader, they chose him as their focus, and then they eventually converted him to Buddhism and caused him to turn from his evil ways. They then would have killed him and immediately poured water on the other gremlin, knowing Gizmo will be the first in line for reincarnation out of all the gremlins, thus returning Gizmo to his fuzzy Mogwai state and freeing him from his more inhabited passions fueled by the gremlin state. Gizmo would have lied to the humans and sworn off ever becoming a gremlin again in atonement for his wicked past. At this point, Stripe would have effectively taken over leadership of the gremlin army. But then there's an issue with Stripe. Yes, he was twice as savage as Gizmo and had ever been, but he was no resistant. But he has no restraint. And so he believed he could achieve what Gizmo never even attempted out of caution. Stripe attempted to attack more populous settlements and cities to quench his bloodlust. I'm sorry, his bloodlust in a way framing villages never could. But this brought too much attention to their atrocities, and the gremlins were wiped out by the united forces of the Asian continent. All of them except Gizmo, and through the ages, Gizmo kept his promise. And this is why we find Gizmo where we do. Locked in a cage, he willingly accepts the last of his kind in a forgotten corner of the world because he knows that deep within him lies an entire army that will cause untold human loss and suffering. And he constantly chooses eternal loneliness and isolation over unleashing it again and the evils of his own people. What do you think of that? That
was in a lot of different ways very out there, but very awesome in the same way.
I'm gonna tell you, the first comment that was on here is Gizmo is caca, and that was by Gizmo Caca.
Gizmo is caca by Gizmo Caca. Okay.
Flatulent Sun, the second comment says, I know the novelization says gremlins are aliens, but I prefer what I think Joe Dante said, if it was him, that he imagines they originated in China as an offspring of a dragon and a panda combined. I can see that. Brain Gremlin, Maximus 421 says, paragraphs are your friend. Hard to read, a huge wall of blinding white text. And when you guys look at the notes, it's a gigantic paragraph, this whole thing. This is why I was struggling to read it. This guy Blaze Gullert says it best. He says, that was creative, though it gave me the feeling of a bad acid trip when reading.
That's honestly what I wanted to say, and I've never took acid, but I just imagine that that's what it would be like right there.
So that is where we want the best film fan theories we have had out here, Tony. Like, I couldn't. Where the hell did he get all these fighting the communities and stuff?
That one. That was a good one right there.
And yes, Brian, Gizmo loves the truffle shuffle. So that is our eternal breakdown of Gremlins with a crazy ass fan theory to end off the year. We saved the best fan theory for the last one of the year and of season 4. Tone, we have done. This is the 40th episode. That's the most episodes that the At the Show podcast has done in its history. I believe, are we at what, 73?
Yeah, I mean, we're at like 77, 78. So we're right around there.
Oh, so we are going to break 100 next year.
We sure are.
Which is pretty big considering we only been doing this. I've been doing this pod for 2 years.
Yeah.
We're at 78. So this will be 79. So yeah, we're gonna break 100 episodes. That's kind of a big thing in podcasting. And we love doing this, and we will be back for season 5 next year. It'll be the same crew, new stuff coming. We're not going to announce what we're going to be doing for the upcoming year because it's a new season, a new beginning, and it's always something big that we do. Any final thoughts on this Gremlins, my man?
Well, first off, I like to look at everything like in the podcast world is year one was like our first album. And we got our feet in the water. And now actually year two, we're taking it a step up. So it's going to be a good time. As you've talked about, this other little show that we're going to be doing, it's going to have a lot of awesome little entertainment stuff. That's going to be cool. But to Gremlins, I think it was a great movie to close out this first season because it's a classic. We started the season with a different kind of classic in Godfather, and we're ending it with, well, an even equal amazing classic, but in a different genre in Gremlins. Talking a little bit again, the performances in this movie are memorable for a lot of different reasons. Honestly, what's funny is that when you think of Corey Feldman, you don't ever think of him his role in this. Not even Judge Reinhold do you think of. Hoyt Axton, though, again, just a really, really great performance that if I could remember anything of like watching this again growing up, my dad, he said exactly like what you said and what others said in the comments, just like the dude was awesome. Like, and honestly, you've talked about and other things like what happens if this actor played that role or that actor played that role. No other actor could have played his role in this movie or done the overall narration. So that's my opinion. Are you muted?
Yes, I am.
Oh,
Yes, I'm muted. I totally agree. And to speak on that, a little bit more of the like stuff that Gremlins has spawned, there is a great Jordan Peele and Keegan Murray, not Keegan Murray, but Keegan uh skit they do for how Gremlins 2 came into fruition. Have you seen this? Have you seen
No,
it?
I haven't. No, I
I'll send
haven't.
it to you. If you can, check it out. Look up Gremlins 2, Jordan Peele and Jordan Peele, and it's Kellen Peele. It's hilarious. Uh, and then if you have a chance, check out from the 108 Cherise's blog on how the dad was a complete jerk. But like you said, we started with a great classic and we ended with another. So all I can do is refer to Fred Ward in this and say,
I'm not mad!
but let's close out this year's show with the one and only Sugar Baggy and his soundtrack pick of the week, the final soundtrack pick of the week for 2024.
The Sugar Baggies soundtrack pick of the week.
Oh, tonight. Well, 7 to 8, 9 episodes ago, I did Wayne's World Part 2. Tonight, let's finish the season by the even better one, Wayne's World Part 1. I mean, personally, imagining Tony Sugar Baggy walking around with a Walkman in 1993, 11 years old with his Wayne's World tape, was something to behold. Because I mean, I really got down with Dreamweaver even right from the get-go. But there's a lot of good tracks on this. Of course, Queen, the band itself, is definitely owes a lot to their rebirth to this whole soundtrack because number one, by doing research to people who were around in the 70s, this song wasn't really that popular in the 70s. It wasn't as popular as even the movie made it out to be. Whereas the soundtrack, when it came out, really, really took off and gave the song a whole new life. And honestly, honestly, for that track, I could tell you it's one that has never gotten old to me, especially the beginning part, with just Freddie on the piano and they're jamming. Like you never really hear too much different things like that. Of course, you're one of your favorites, Red Hot Chili Peppers, on there doing Sticka Micka Nico B-side from the Under the Bridge European single, also for those musical fans on there, but included on the Wayne's World soundtrack. As you heard there at the beginning, Tia Carrere, excellent vocals here for that track, which you heard, which is Why You Want to Break My Heart. You had Ballroom Blitz she does on here. Personally, this is my introduction to Jimi Hendrix. I would play Foxy Lady over and over and over, probably because I thought one day I was going to be able to do that to the lady of my dreams like Garth did in the movie, but just rocking out was cool enough. Not included on all the versions was a track by Soundgarden called Loud Love. Black Sabbath was on the soundtrack doing Time Machine. Really crazy though, the tracks 2 and 3 are by Cinderella doing Hot and Bothered, who obviously not a bad track, and Rock Candy by Bullet Boys. The songs in the movie, there were quite a couple that were in but not included on the soundtrack. Mike Myers doing Happy Birthday, Mr. President, originally done by Marilyn Monroe. Touch Me by Tia Carrere, another great song. Ugly Kid Joe, Everything About You. Great all-around soundtrack, man. For the time period. Haven't heard too many negative things about it. Feed My Frankenstein is definitely the probably one of the most memorable things from the soundtrack. Just the whole interaction with Alice Cooper in the movie. Milwaukee. It is, that whole thing. And honestly, forever I will just incorporate so many of these songs to pieces in the movie. So again, originally released February 18th of 1992, coming in at about 60 minutes. Pretty good soundtrack, which got to number 33 on the Billboard Top 200. In the U.S. Billboard 200 chart, it actually got higher than that. It actually made it to the year-end chart. It made it to 33. But the overall, it was number 1. And it sold over 2 million copies in the United States. So not that shabby of a soundtrack.
Yeah, and Tia Carrere did all her own singing for Crucial Taunt, which is the name of her band. One of my favorite parts of the film is when they see Meatloaf and he says, who's on? He goes, the Shitty Beatles and Crucial Taunt. He goes, how are the Shitty Beatles? Shitty. But she's awesome in the film. Also, a lot of, people who grew up with this movie had a crush on her. She's still awesome she was awesome in Showdown in Little Tokyo, a Dolph Lundgren film. But yeah, it's the first time we saw Tia Carrere. Also, my wife, my padrina of my son, his padrina, it's my wife's cousin, Lori, and she is a reincarnate living Garth. So you see, she has the personality of Garth that has his mannerisms and whatnot. She's awesome. So whenever I see the Foxy, me and my wife automatically think of Lori. So shout out to her. The Garth Foxy lady is probably one of the funniest parts in the film. It also reminds you of the Family Guy part where Edison plays that in his house as he yells at the guy across the street. There's another few parts of it Family Guy I actually like. Brian says this soundtrack desperately needs to be released on vinyl, and I totally agree. Classic Wayne's World film. Like you said, great coverage of the Queen. It really brought Queen back. If you notice in the film, Garth doesn't look like he's acting goofy, but Dana Carvey didn't learn the words. That's why he's just mouthing it. But yeah, it's awesome. Great pick, Tom.
Awesome.
Okay, so that's our show for the week and our last show of 2024. We will be back the first week of January. So January 6th. No, not 6th. I'm sorry. January 3rd, we will be back, which is a Friday. January 6th happened to pop up on 2023. 2024. I was looking at that calendar. But January 3rd, 2025 will be the new season of the At the Show pod, which will be season 5. Be sure to check out the Hookup on Music that Tony just did a show a little bit while ago. Tony, tell us about that one.
Got my good friend Mike to join me from Chirp Radio. We broke down some of his favorite albums of the year, including the new Cure album, which is just spinning overly and overly in our heads. Also talked about some Christmas tunes to some great effect. Just a good conversation. He's a 3-time guest. He'd already said that he's going to get a jacket after 5 times, which means it's going to come back in the new year. But just an all-around really good conversation because it's good to hear about some music sometimes that you might miss. And he's really good at like filling in the lines of some things that you might not have heard of. So it was a good conversation. Check that out. Also coming back, and it's going to come back, and it's hopefully every single week, is the VHS. Will be making its return. I already have 2 in the can. I'm just trying to think about what day I'm going to try to release those. Maybe Monday, since nothing really ever gets released on those days here, just to kind of put something out there too, to continue us spreading the word. And then according to Mr. Yumper here, we are going to bring our other little show here coming up here in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, we'll be having that out soon. It'll be coming out probably recorded first, and then we'll probably do a live ones every once in a while. That'll be more of a shorter version of just with news in the entertainment area that was centered around TV and movies. So check that out when it comes out. Be sure to check out It's Getting Drafty in here. He just did an episode on favorite Christmas tunes that was really fun. He did it with a great shirt, Tony, as well. He did it with friends of the show, Julie Fonseca, aka Turkey Fonseca of the Chicago Sports Bums. He also had on Celeste of the Ass Crew, and also fellow Penguin and Ass member Roxy was on there with him as well. They actually had some really, really good picks for the show. Check it out. I like they're all mix of different things. Julie had Frank Sinatra. Brian had Run DMC. So I liked all their mix of picks they had for that show. So check them out on the Statistic Penguin Studios YouTube, and just check us out in the upcoming year. We're gonna come back with a lot more stuff and a lot more rockin' tunes, as Tony would say.
Yes.
We will not end up like the
That's only going to be me if Yumper just keeps talking to me about Blink-182. I don't want to hear about those guys. I don't want to. I'm just kidding. I like them.
Cool. I don't like Blink-182. But Brian S. says the Magnificent Stan, the Draft Master, has just made an announcement. January 7th, best wrestlers to never win a world title. I will give you my first pick, Scott Hall. Give one, Tony.
Ooh, doink.
Doink. Dink and doink. You know, Bret Hart's kid used to size up Dink. That's what he said. But that's our show. We want to thank you again for everyone who's followed us these 40 episodes this year. And with the new transition of the show, I really have enjoyed. This has been like the funnest stuff I've done in a while. Really happy to have you on, Tone, with me on this wild ride.
40 episodes. I'll be frankly honest with you. 30 episodes. Frankly honest with you. It's been a breeze, man. It's been a great time. Honestly, any partner or anything I've ever worked on, it was been like riding a bike, my man. So I can't wait to see what we do next season.
Yes, sir. With that, thank you again for listening. We will be back on January 3rd with a new show. So check out the YouTubes and check out the Twitters for the next show announcement. It's going to be a good one. But everybody have a good night. Happy holidays and happy New Year to everybody. And we'll see you in 2025.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the At the Show podcast, a Sadistic Penguin Studios production.
Game over, man. It's game over. What the fuck are we gonna do now? What are we gonna do?
Maybe we could build a fire, sing a couple of songs, huh? Why don't we try that?